And we are live. So welcome back to the Get Your Shit Together show. And today I am joined with an amazing guest who has an incredible story about addiction, how they were effectively able to hide it for many, many years until it came to a head. And they have, after that experience, they have created an amazing business called WHYSUPP, where they've partnered with their best friend to help people talk about addiction as well as just mental health in general. So please welcome Liam McBride. How you doing?
I'm all right. That was a great intro, that. You can come with us when we're next presenting.
Honestly, I always think I do really crappy introductions, but if you say it's good, I'm going to go with it.
Oh, that was a good one. That was good. Yeah, I'm all right. Thank you. Yeah, thank you very much for having me.
No, you're so welcome. You're so welcome. Do you know what's really funny? Yesterday, I put up a post on LinkedIn about how much I love the Northern accent. And then, funny enough, you're on today. So, seriously, you're just making me the happiest person in the world to be chatting with you.
Oh, happy days, yeah. I can't do much about the accent. You're stuck with it, I'm afraid.
No, that's completely fair enough. So today we are going to be talking about a really, really important topic. And I think it's something where there's a lot of misconceptions that kind of go with addiction. You know, I think there's a lot of different ways people look at it. And, you know, I think a lot of us, if we say, if we think of addicts or people who have addiction, we have a very different image in our head compared to somebody that's a corporate professional, somebody that's very successful, somebody that's built a business. But that's essentially your story, right? Like, you built a very successful business, and you were able to hide it really effectively for many years.
Yeah, that is true. I mean, it's when I tell my story, quite often with younger people, I do start off by saying I think one of the biggest things I can do with my story is challenge your preconceptions and stereotypes that you've got to do with addiction. You know, even today, even the job that I do, and kind of with the knowledge I have today, I still have an image pop up in my mind of an addict. And I think most people would. It's maybe not the same image, but I would bet there's common themes, you know. And it's not the most PC, but, you know, I have like homeless, dirty, no money, injecting, all that sort of thing. That's like my perception. When Mark answers, actually, who obviously my business partner and friend, he says he thinks of the guy outside a shop with a bag and a bottle. You know, that's like the image he gets when he thinks of addiction. And yeah, I was none of those things really. No, doesn't make me better or worse, but I just didn't fit that profile. So I think that's one of the biggest things I can do, and that's one of the things we try and do with WHYSUPP. You know, addiction doesn't have a face really. You know, it's varied. It doesn't have a demographic. You know, and like you say, in many ways, I was almost the polar opposite to some of those things. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that, you know, you do definitely challenge the stereotypical views that most people have. And yeah, you're right, it's not PC, but if you spoke to most people and said, what would you think of an addict? You know, we would have completely different views and different opinions. So I think your story is really important to tell, but we need to go back to the start, because it's not a short story at the end of the day. So
we were on the phone a while, weren't we?
We were, but that's okay. That's why we're here, so we can talk about it again. So when did you actually start using alcohol or drugs?
I was probably about 13, 14. And I don't think it was, and I still don't think it is that unusual, the way that I started experimenting really with alcohol and drugs. So 13 or 14 years old roughly, drinking and smoking cannabis, you know, and it wasn't really about the way it felt. It wasn't addiction. I didn't really have any knowledge about it. It was just something that everyone was doing. It was something that I wanted to be part of. No one forced me. You know, there was no traumatic event that led me there. It was just something that the people I was hanging around with were doing, and it kind of was a lifestyle, sort of social, you know, that kind of thing. And very quickly I was doing those sorts of things every day. But yeah, that's how it started. And like I say, it wasn't about a feeling. I think the first time I did both of those things, I threw up. So it wasn't you know, it wasn't really about sort of an amazing first experience with those things. But yeah, and I don't think that's that unusual. I think a lot of people probably did similar things around a similar age. You know, I think it's quite common.
Yeah, I will completely admit that I was doing those things at a really young age too. So I think that, you know, most of us have experienced either with just alcohol and cannabis, you know, even in our teenage years. But what's really interesting, you said that nothing traumatic happened. And I think that's something that also people talk about is, you know, some trauma happened and then they became an addict and that's their story. But yours was more of I was really young. It was the social setting that I was in.
Yeah, very much so. I mean, I think we can all, you know, I had life events come up shortly after that. But for me, I think, and you know, and I'm sure there are people who have a traumatic event that lead them to addiction or other potential behaviours. But for me, that's not how it started. I commenced a relationship with drugs and alcohol. And then when the traumatic events came or when the stress came, might not even been traumatic, that relationship was already there, and it was far easier turning to that relationship than it was to go into another person and saying, I'm struggling or this is difficult, because I didn't get judged off drugs or alcohol. You know what I mean? And I didn't have the fear of a reaction. I didn't have to be honest with it. You know, so there was a few things really that made that the easier option. And very quickly, I thought it became a normal thing to do, you know, not just on the stressful events, on the everyday events, you know, like when I don't know if it was the same for you, but when we were growing up, the thing that people used to talk about when they reference negative behaviours is glamorising. And I don't think that was the issue I grew up with. I think I had the issue of things being normalised. So I grew up thinking drugs and alcohol were a normal part of life. In actual fact, I thought I was pretty good at it as well, because I could still do normal things while taking drugs and alcohol. So it was a very different thing, that. But that normalising meant it was easy to turn to.
Yeah, you know what, I talk about normalization of a lot of things, and I think that if you're surrounded by people who are doing the same thing, it's normalized at the end of the day. I talk about that with stress, right? So the way I talk about it is, you know, we normalize stress every single day by saying, oh, you know, how are you? It's like, oh, you know, I'm really busy, I'm a bit stressed out, but how are you? Like, how many people, you know, you hear people say that, and that becomes an issue when we actually go, actually, this is actually a problem. It's difficult to see. So, for instance, you just said that you built a relationship with drugs and alcohol. So how did it evolve? So you started when you were 13, 14. So how did it evolve into your later teenage years? I know you said you had a life event and you had stresses that came up, but how did it evolve?
I think pretty organically. You know, I mean, very quickly, smoking cannabis in particular became more of a lifestyle. You know, and that was something that I didn't put down until I was really quite a lot older. And I genuinely believed that there was very little consequences of some of those behaviours. But I mean, look, I was smoking weed every day pretty much from the word go. I think, you know, in school, out of school, everywhere, that was par for the course, really. And I liked a lot of the things that went along with that, like, you know, some of the bravado and image and all that sort of thing. And I would have very much been someone who shouted about legalizing and all, you know. I thought I was quite an intelligent cannabis smoker at times, you know. But I know very different today. But yeah, very quickly smoking cannabis every day, drinking regularly. I think from 15, 16, starting to go out, fake IDs, all that kind of thing. And by the time I was sort of 15, 16, taking Class A's several times a week. And it just became, like I say, it just became part of how I grew up. You know, like the double life started quite quickly, because even the people I smoked weed with and drank with didn't know I took Class A's at that age. I had different groups of friends for different types of behaviour. I was a different person in the daylight hours to the evening hours. You know, that was a definite. A life event coming up with me, which meant that I had quite a lot of freedom, because my mum had to work an awful lot to sort of counter what was going on. And yeah, I abused that freedom. So at 15, 16, all my brothers and sisters had moved out. My last sister, being the closest, had gone to uni. So I pretty much had run of the house for a lot of the time. I wasn't going in school a lot, but I got on with all the teachers. So I had that situation boxed off. I thought I had it all going on, to be honest. Like, I had receptionists like around my finger and that. I think it's weird, really. It's like two contrasting people, because on the one hand, I was getting involved in these behaviours and normalising abnormal behaviour. On the other hand, I think because I was really aware of this situation that the family was going through, and my mum working loads, I was quite driven. You know, I was genuinely quite driven, and you could argue that's a trait of addiction, you know. But I was always quite entrepreneurial. I always had regular income. I always worked. I was always buying and selling something. And I was just kind of like always in a situation. I was quite a popular lad, and I liked all the social party lifestyle. That fitted really well with me and who I wanted to be. And I think, you know, you talk about going up to those late teenage years. In many ways, looking back with the knowledge I have today of addiction and mental health, that was there pretty early. But because I was in an environment around people and in places where a lot of people were doing it, it didn't stand out. You know, the fact I might have done it a bit more, the fact that I might not have been able to stop, the fact that, you know, I didn't have the handbrake, and the fact that I went until I passed out or until I was hallucinating or all that sort of stuff, it just didn't stand out because I was with people who were doing similar things. You know, at 17, 18, in college, you know, going in college after not being in bed for 2 days, and it was laughed at. You know, it wasn't an alarm bell. It was funny, you know, to the people around me. And I don't blame them for 1 minute. It probably was funny, and they're only 17, 18. They don't know any different. But if the person I was today saw someone like that, I'd be stepping in. But there wasn't that knowledge, you know. There wasn't that awareness around the people I was with. There wasn't that knowledge, you know. And yeah, it just became something that pulled me in different directions. I remember about 17, 18, actually saying to my mum, I thought I was going mad, in tears. And it was because I was taking loads of class A's. You know, my chemicals were all over the show and stuff. And, you know, I'd regularly be tripping, you know, in the morning, not at night, in the morning before I was going to college, because I hadn't slept for days on end and stuff. There were things like that, you know, that I guarantee most social users probably don't have that. You know, there was things standing out already. Even the way I dealt with things back then, you know, I didn't have, you mentioned stress, I didn't have stress management. I had drink and drug use. You know, I didn't have coping strategies. I had getting off my head strategies, you know, and there'd always be a time where it fitted into what was going on. Yeah, and it was looking back, it was probably chaos. But like I say, because at that age, you're not married, you don't have kids, you don't have jobs and mortgages and all that. It was the lifestyle that a lot of people were living, and the fact that someone was living it more, or, you know, it doesn't stand out. So yeah, it was pretty messy, to be honest, up till I was it was pretty messy. Yeah, it was pretty messy when I look back. I don't know, I lived the life I was living back then.
Yeah, I think what's really interesting is the fact that a lot of you had warning signs to the people around you. So you like your loved ones, you like your mum, and obviously your other siblings would probably go, there's warning signs, but you didn't have other consequences. It wasn't like you were failing school or anything like that. You know, you passed school, got into college, you went to college, and you were, you know, from our conversation off screen, you were saying that you were doing pretty well at college. It wasn't like you were failing or anything like that. You were very motivated. So you weren't having the consequences of, you know, not passing, you know, your classes, not doing well financially or anything like that. You were just surrounding yourself with people who were doing the same thing as you. But you were still being able to have the other side of your life, the other, you know, the flip side of your life, which is going to school, getting good grades, having relationships with other people. So I think that the warning signs probably just weren't dramatic enough for people to step in, I'm imagining.
Yeah, that's it. I think because to some extent it wasn't 24/7 using, you know, there was, you know, I might have used most nights at 17, 18, or I might have, you know, but it wasn't 24/7 using, you know. I don't know if I go as far as to say good grades, but I got average grades pretty easily.
Yeah.
And you know, to some extent, you know, manipulated things at college to make sure that happened. You know, like I said, I wasn't a tearaway. I got on with all the teachers and stuff, and because I was probably a likable lad, you know, nobody, like you said, the alarm bell wasn't ringing, even though there was signs looking back at the moment, in the moment, and at the time, the answers I would give and the life I would portray when I was there probably didn't tell anyone, you know, didn't suggest that the issue was as big as it was. And you know, at that age, using and drinking and going out getting smashed 3 or 4 times a week, there'll be a lot of people who do that who aren't addicted, you know.
Yeah.
So they kind of think it's like we said before, it's kind of where does the line come in? You know, where does that line come in of hang on, he's having a problem. Now I know with what I know today, there were things that could have been picked up or spotted or stood out, but would the average person know that without that knowledge? Probably not.
Yeah. I mean, hindsight's a wonderful thing. So being able to look back and go, if I saw that, if I see these behaviors in myself, we will get to that as well. But so you went to college, you were starting to, you know, drink and do Class A drugs a little bit more sort of in the evenings as well. So how did that then transition into early adulthood and really getting into that sort of like corporate world and into that business world?
So I lived on my own when I was 18 and rented rooms to friends. To be honest, I made my decisions on what happened next with it. Like when I was 18, I went into a house. It was actually one of my dad's houses. And I rented the rooms out, which meant I got a free room. I got every loan and overdraft I could possibly get. And I went and started on a course that had an NHS bursary. So to be honest, for my first year at uni, I was rolling in it. Like it were brilliant. Yeah, but I only managed 3 months of that course and then realised that wasn't going to work out. So I had to work for a bit. But then I did go back to uni. I did a building surveying and property management degree in this house that I was renting out to various friends, and it was again carnage, to be honest. I played every trick in the book to get through that degree. You know, there was a relative dying every week. I was like, my assignment was late because of this and that. And, you know, it was just everything you could possibly do. But and a lot of chaos going on at that house. There's some stories that I'd probably say off camera. But yeah, there was a lot of things going on at that house. But I got through. But I think by the time I finished that degree, you know, you mentioned that sort of going into the professional world. I was lucky, really. I'd got an inroad into a firm of chartered surveyors. And it was probably then where things started to stand out to me. So like, I knew that the majority of people I'd seen finish degrees, well, they settle down when they get the career job. They grow up, they mature, you know, they're making life plans. And yet I'd still go out for 2 beers and be out for 4 days, you know, like it'd be like I knew something was amiss. But I genuinely wanted to do well at my career. Like, you know, I didn't want to see all that go to waste. So, but I thought my issue was going out. I didn't know about it. Like, I genuinely thought it's when I go out. Like, I'm fine if I don't go out. Like, so that's all right. And so, yeah, I made a conscious decision. I made a few decisions actually at that time. I made a decision that I needed to stop going out as much. I made a decision to move my long-term girlfriend, who I'd been with since I was 16, who didn't know I took drugs, into the house, and kind of like try to do that maturing and kind of settling down thing. Yeah, so that's what I did. But I think in that same decision-making process, I kind of okayed the fact that because I wasn't going out, because I wasn't getting in bother, that it'd be all right for me to use it home on my own. You know, that's okay, because I'm not going to go and get in fights. I'm not going missing and all that sort of thing. And so that's what I started to do. And I think for a while, I kind of managed that. Functioned. A lot of you hear that word a lot, functioned. So, you know, I'd go and do my job, and I did a pretty good job of it, a bit like when I was at school and college. I wasn't getting in bother, and I'd drink and smoke weed or use other things, you know, a few times a week, and started doing it on my own. And the secrecy around it got more So this thing that had started out as social and party lifestyle and all that kind of thing, well, it ended up with me on my own, sneaking around in my own house, you know, like, and that kind of went from like maybe weekend to a few times a week. So yeah, that's probably like what I would consider quite a big milestone in my addiction, really. I think whenever you start doing something on your own in secret, it's a bit of a red flag.
Yeah, like, you know, it's different when you're going out. Obviously, there's an issue there when you're still going out. But if you're surrounding yourself with people that are doing it, there's that kind of like, well, everyone else is doing it kind of mentality. But then going in your house, you know, hiding it from your girlfriend, having that secrecy, that brings a completely different element into the world at the end of the day, and how you're feeling about yourself and how you're feeling about the situation you're in.
Yeah, it's massive. It adds a whole nother dynamic to what you're doing, really. And again, I thought, you know, well, I was still young and consequences weren't great, and you know, it wasn't 24/7, so it'll be okay. I don't need to tell anyone, and I, you know, I'll sort it out. I'll get engaged, get married, and plan to have kids, and that'll make me stop. You know, and that's what I did, really. And around that time as well, that's when my career took a big shift as well. So construction, I was involved in a construction company. We were heavily involved in the education sector. And the recession hit and a lot of funding for projects was pulled and everything looked a bit uncertain. And I had an opportunity, really, to get involved in recruitment. And I took it. So long story short, I got involved in recruitment. It was a company my dad had set up, really, I suppose. It was an industrial recruiter, and it was having a tough time, but and as in recruitment, as you probably know, it wasn't just the clients and everything else, it was the staffing of the business that was difficult. I was like, look, my job's potentially at risk in construction anyway. I'm not really risking that much. Let me come in and have a go. You know, let me see what I can do. You're having a nightmare with key people. Let me change it. And so I got engaged. We had a baby on the way, and I got involved in recruitment pretty much all in one go.
Wow. Huge changes. Yeah. Huge changes.
Yeah. So yeah, and I think, you know, for a while, every now and again, I managed to kind of, I wouldn't say get myself straight, I'd say tone things down. You know, when events came up like that, I'd be like, right, this is it now. Well, I'm getting married, or baby's coming, or I've gone into this new job, and I'd tone things down. And for me, that meant I'd probably just have a drink normally at a weekend and smoke weed. But it only ever lasted so long. So I got involved in recruitment, went in, literally started on the phones. I didn't know the industry. I was literally like bottom up, started. I had to kind of learn a lot. And over a period of time, the business grew, you know. Very lucky that someone who I'd known for a very long time, who was experienced in recruitment, agreed to come in. And me and him pretty much built this business. There was obviously some other key staff, but we were the sort of two directors by the end, and we kind of built this sector. I'm not going to say too much or anything else because I don't want to do any discredit to the business that's still there, but we built this specialist sector nationwide, became number one in the UK in that sector, and built a very, very successful business. And we were kind of the front of it. And then there was two other directors kind of behind the scenes doing more the accounting, strategic stuff. Yeah, and I loved it for a bit, to be honest. Like, it was me and him shoulder to shoulder and kind of like going, taking it on. And yeah, it was good. But alongside that, as that took off, materially things took off, financially things took off, and so did my using, my drinking, my drugging, in particular my use of cocaine went through the roof. And very quickly I was not, you know, very quickly, I'm not sure, but over a period of time, I kind of went from regular weekend social to midweek, to a few times a week, to fast forward 7-10 years, I was in a position where I hated what I was doing. I hated who I was. I was using 24/7, and I couldn't tell anyone. Couldn't tell anyone. So yeah, it was really messy at the end for me and everyone around me. You know,
Yeah.
it was, a lot went on.
So again, it comes down to, you know, you set up this business in recruitment, and recruitment is one of those industries, if you've ever worked in it, and I know that I actually had a few recruiters actually reach out to me going, I'm looking forward to watching this. But recruitment's a really interesting industry. There we go. Got it out. Where, again, that you can be surrounded by the alcohol and, you know, drug use and all of that. I'm not saying all of recruitment's like that, but there are elements of that. I worked in recruitment myself. So it's definitely an industry. It's a definitely interesting industry because the stresses are pretty high. The money you can get is quite high as well. And so if you're building your business, the more money you get, the more money you have to spend on other drugs, more expensive drugs and things like that. And then again, the consequences wasn't there. It wasn't like you were failing with work. You know, you're still married. You still had, you know, I'm guessing you had a couple more kids along the way at this stage. Yeah. So, you know, 7 years later down the track, you're married, you've got kids, you've got an incredibly successful business, and you've got this really intense secret that you can't tell anyone about.
Yeah, it was pretty much like you just described, really. So about this time, I was just about at 3 kids. So, you know, things had progressed. My lifestyle had changed. I'd grown to hate the recruitment industry, and that's not a reflection on recruitment or the people I work with, but I just felt it wasn't me. And I think that combined with the things I was doing to myself and getting involved with, and I think that probably came out. Not probably, it definitely did. So I think people knew that I wasn't happy. And it became really difficult because I couldn't tell anyone about my drug use. I felt I couldn't tell anyone how I was feeling, and I felt like I couldn't change my position because I built a lifestyle that relied on that position. Yeah. And I felt, is trapped the right word? It sounds dramatic, but I felt stuck, and I felt like I was only going in one direction, and that was to self-destruct. And I think I knew that pretty early on. And you know, people might have known a bit about my social using, certain people, but at this stage, like, my loved ones still didn't know about my using. And I think nobody really knew the extent of what I was doing. What started to get noticed more than anything else was probably my behaviours. So people would say, like, you've changed, or I'd be doing things I shouldn't do, or like my motivation and enthusiasm. Or on the flip side, I'd be like really on it one day and then really not the other, and really sort of erratic. And I think it was probably quite hard for anyone around me to come and challenge me. You know, I was a key pivotal person within the business. And I was also a pretty fiery and strong personality, and I wouldn't have really liked to be challenged. And I think that probably made it really difficult doing what's right for the business, doing what's right for Liam, and also doing what's right for that person, which is they probably didn't deserve to get what they'd have got if they'd have challenged me. So I think I made it quite difficult. I was quite manipulative. I played on situations in my personal life to kind of mask over what I was doing and stuff. And yeah, I think it was a pretty messy time. And then we decided we were going to sell the business about 7 or 8 years in. And that was the next thing that in my mind, yeah, right, that's it. That'll be the thing then this time. That'll be the one that sorts me out, you know. That's my way out. That's my golden ticket to happy Liam, you know. And that's kind of what I thought. And I remember my colleague at the time, my co-director, the guy I told you that I'd worked so closely with, said to me, I just need you to be on it for the next 2 years. I just need you to get through this process. Can you do that? And I was like, yeah. Not a chance. I was too far gone at that point. And yeah, it was awful. I had stuff going on in my personal life. I was using that relationship with drugs and alcohol for everything at that point. I was, you know, I'd not sleep for days on end. I had prescription drugs in the morning. to kind of like level me out. Coke from dinner time onwards every day. Makeup on my face in the morning to hide signs of drug use. Sneaking around, just awful. When I'd fall asleep in meetings. So we'd go through the sale process. I'd have like, what do they call them? Corporate finance, FDs, venture capitalists, and all these like really important people. And you'd have me in the corner sleeping, like literally sleeping in a meeting, and then I'd go out and use and come back in, and it was awful. It was really awful. And I can't imagine what the people around me must have been thinking. But yeah, it was horrendous, and fortunately we did get the deal done. And I got what I thought was life-changing money, and my life changed, but not in the way that I expected. So yeah.
So that's, it's really interesting that you've always got these milestones, and I think a lot of people can relate to that. It's like, once I get here, even if they're not they don't have an addiction to something, it's like, oh, once I get here, I'll do X, Y, and Z, which is healthier. So, I speak to a lot of business owners that have that kind of mentality as well. It's like, you know what, I won't work 18-hour days once I reach X, Y, and Z. But once you've created that lifestyle, it is really hard to break it. So obviously having an addiction is completely different to that, but just, creating some, we all have those moments where we kind of future me myself, which is, once I've, for you, it's like, once I get married, I'll tone it down, or once I have kids, I'll stop. And well, now I just really hate my career and really hate my job right now. Again, no shade to the recruitment industry, but just how you were feeling in it. But we'll sell this business, and then, my life will change again in a positive way. I'll stop using, I'll be happier, I won't need to use. But then that's not quite what happened, was it?
No, not at all. So we achieved the sale, and I did in effect get life-changing money, but my life didn't change the way that I thought it would. So the deal went through, and pretty much from that point on, my world fell apart. And I don't say that lightly. Like, that's literally what happened. The night of the sale, the day when we were celebrating and we signed it, and it was all this, that, and the other, I ended up sneaking back into my office. I was in floods of tears, and I think that was the first time I was challenged on my behaviour by my core director. And he kind of said, like, we need to talk. And I think once the deal was done, he wasn't the only one who kind of challenged me at that point. A close friend also said to me, I'm glad you've managed to get the deal done, but we need to talk tomorrow. So I knew then that the game was up, and it was just more of that followed. So before, I thought I was like better than MI5. I made everything boxed off and all that. And in actual fact, what I didn't realise is most people were aware of what I was up to. I started getting caught. And I think 3 days after I sold the business, I was kicked out of my family home with a woman that I'd been with since I was 16 for behaviours and things I was doing. And at that point then, I had a load of money in the bank. I didn't have a job. I wasn't living with my kids, and I stopped caring. I just stopped caring what people thought. I had no need, I didn't care about consequences. Before, I didn't have consequences. Now I had them, and my head was gone. I didn't care. And so I just went on like this almighty kind of decline, really. And I kept getting caught. I was doing things and going to places where you shouldn't be going. And my drug use went through the roof, spending an awful lot of money. But it wasn't really the money that's the issue. My mental health was gone. I can't even put myself in the frame of mind I was in then. My judgment, my thinking, the way I felt, I kind of accepted that I weren't going to be here much longer. That's like where my head was at. And then I crashed. I think I crashed 4 cars in a week. And then like that got people's attention, that like, and it was pretty messy as well. I didn't just crash 4 cars. Like, I crashed a car, I was in a hire car, I crashed the hire car, I had to pay the rental car company off. It was just like awful. It was just a mess. And then it was then that I started crossing paths with Mark, my school friend, more and more. I'd crossed paths with him for the previous probably 2 years a lot, actually. We'd always been friends. But it was around then that I was like, he'd put something in my head. Last few times I'd seen him, he was asking questions. Someone had someone had said to him, if we don't get a grip on Liam, we're going to be carrying his coffin. So he was one of the few that kept asking me questions. And then when I crashed them cars and I was like, I can't really explain this one away, I rang him up and I said to him at the time, I was like, I need to see you, because he'd turned his life around at that point. He was in recovery from his gambling addiction. So I met him. And then before I met him, I was like, don't look like you used to look like, prepare yourself, all that sort of stuff. And I met him and sat down and I just brought it down to him. And I was like, I said, I can't carry on. I don't know what to do. I need help. But I was petrified. Like, it's weird, really. Like, although I didn't care, I actually cared an awful lot, because what I was worried about was everyone finding out how bad I'd been. Do you know what I mean? Like, I was like, I can't tell everyone. Then they'll know what I've been up to. They'll know I've lied. Then they won't love me. If they don't love me, then there's no point in me getting right, and I might as well not be. And it's just, so he helped me have some discussions with family, friends, and pretty quickly after that discussion, I was in a treatment centre. I was in a rehab facility, which was just wild, really. 6 months before, I'd sold a business, and I used to fight. I used to be a Thai boxer. So literally 6 months before, it might have been 8 months, I'd sold a business for X amount of pounds, and I'd just won a British title. And then I woke up and I was like, I was in an acute psychiatric hospital under lock and key in a suicide prevention ward for a drug addiction. I was like, how's this even? And I hadn't lost everything. You know, I still had money in the bank. I still had cars and housing. It, you know, it wasn't about what I'd lost. It was where I was at. Do you know what I mean? And I think that's important as well. Some people, I speak to a lot of people and they're like, yeah, but I can afford it. Or yeah, I can do that. And I'm like, it's not even part of it. Like, it's not even part of it. You know, I didn't lose everything. I lost myself. And I'm not saying which is better or worse, but you can't get yourself back if you don't get sorted. You can always get a car back. You can always get a night. Do you know what I mean? Like, so.
Yeah. I think that's a really, like, that comes back down to what we were saying at the beginning of this, which was the way that we perceive addicts. It's, you know, it's like, I haven't lost everything. I can afford it. Like, I don't have a problem because, you know, I'm not homeless. I've got relationships, but I can just afford this lifestyle. And I think that mentality does need to change. And I think a lot of people can kind of get stuck into that mentality. You know, especially like I've obviously have worked in recruitment, and I've worked with recruiters as well. And, you know, that's like, yeah, but we just have a couple of beers after work. Like, that's just what we do. You know, we just go on benders. It's just what we do. And I think that,
play hard.
Yeah, right. It's that mentality. And a lot of salespeople can probably relate to that as well, not just recruiters, but, you know, there is that element of like, yeah, but I'm not losing everything. Like, I'm still successful. I'm still doing that. But for you, you know, you were into your fitness. You'd won like a British title in Thai boxing, which is crazy. And you know, and you were still using at that time, and you just sold a business. And now you've woken up in a completely different world just 6 to 8 months later. And you're right, it's not about what you lost. It's about, you know, it's not losing things. It's about losing yourself. And I think that you're right. Once you lose yourself, it is really hard to find that yourself back. You can always get more money. You can always get more cars. You can always get more material things. But you've got to make sure that you've got a good relationship with yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, I think I lost myself years before that point, to be honest. I just think that was sometimes you need a short, sharp shock, and I got one when everything started to come out. But I don't think I knew who I was for quite some time, and I think that's why I was doing some of the things I was doing, you know. But yeah, so I ended up in this treatment centre rehab. I didn't mind going, to be honest. Like, I was like, my life is chaos, put me in. Do you know what I mean? Book me in. I'm happy, like, let's go. But like I say, that first day, when it's weird, like, I thought I was going to a particularly nice one as well. I paid quite a lot of money. And it was in lovely grounds. But then when I went in the building, it was like one of those prison doors, like it locked. And they were like, you're in an acute psychiatric hospital. I was like, whoa, I didn't sign up for this. Like, you know, and there was genuine, what I would call, and again, I don't say this now, but at the time, what I would have called crazy people. I was in the same building as them. Like, do you know what I mean? It was nuts. Like, but yeah, and I was in there for 4 weeks. And then I came out of there, and I just struggled. Like, I struggled a lot. On the way in, everything had come out. Like, everything. My family were in turmoil. colleagues, previous colleagues, although I didn't work with them because I'd worked with them for so long, they were hurt, I've no doubt. Friends, everything had come out. I went in there for 4 weeks and I was like safe in a bubble, you know, not really aware of what was going on outside. And then I was just dropped back into like my old life, you know. And where I'd used drink and drugs for 19 years and were on the way into that place, I'd hurt everyone. And so like I went back out as this addict who'd hurt you all, and I just couldn't handle it. Like I just couldn't handle it. And I kept relapsing, which is like just doing what I always did, but I couldn't do it in the same fashion. So the ways I was doing it were quite dangerous and not good. So much so I was like, I'd be like wandering around forests on my own, and like I got psychosis. So I got drug-induced psychosis, which if anyone doesn't know, it's where you see and hear things. So it's mad, you know, in a very short space of time, this person that was probably seen as successful, you know, was literally wandering around forest looking like an absolute wreck. And I was at home seeing and hearing things that weren't there. And it was, like I say, I think of it now like I'm mad, but for the people around me, that's like the thing I can never really put myself in that space. And I was told I needed to go away again. And this was probably like the big turning point for me. I was told that the chaos that I was like bringing, I had to leave the house from my wife and kids again. And I was told I was going, but I didn't really know what I was doing or where I was going. And then I was like put on a train. And at the time, I had a rucksack, a blow-up bed, and a pack of 20 fags. That was literally like no joke. That is what I had on me. All my money was taken off me, and I got on this train, and then I got off at the other end, and Mark was waiting for me. I knew he was waiting, but I didn't know what had been discussed or arranged. He'd kind of made this agreement without me involved. And long story short, I was living with him in the Midlands in his one-bed flat for like 4 months. I think I was down there. So Mark really became like my halfway house. I was in the real world. I had someone with me who was like a safe pair of eyes and ears who understood addiction and recovery. And I was able to get a break, really, and try and build a recovery. And it was dead hard, honest. Like, it was horrible, like, at times. Not because of anything to do with Mark. Mark were great. Like, he took my cash card off me. I had to find friends on my phone. I had to do, like, a weekly planner of, like, where I'd be and when and all that sort of stuff. And I benefited from things from his recovery, but he couldn't do it for me. You know, I had to go and find groups and meetings and build this routine. But obviously, I'd just stopped taking drink drugs for 19 years. So it was like you've seen Spinal Tap where they turned the volume up to 11. It was like someone had turned the volume up to 11, and I was like, whoa, like all these feelings and thoughts. And I thought I was going mad. Like, genuinely, like. And I think I learned more about my mental health in that first 6 to 12 months than I have ever learned in my previous 32 years, you know, like how to manage that. I'm totally abstinent. I don't drink, I don't take drugs. So whether it's good, bad, or in the middle, I've got to feel it. I've got to go through it. I can't distract. I can't escape. I can't go around. So I have to be able to cope. You know, so I learned a lot about what I can do in my day to keep myself in the best possible place, to just handle what comes up, you know. And so, yeah, that's when it started to turn around. So I was with Mark for about 4 months. And in that 4 months, we were sharing stories. Like, oh, I didn't know you did that. Oh, I didn't know that. And, you know, and in the end, we were like, Mark was at a crossroads. He was, you know, he stays down there, comes home, what do I do next? He got a few years under his belt, I think 3 years under his belt with his recovery at that point. And I was saying, whatever I do next, I'm fortunate in the sense that I've probably got the ability to start something, but whatever I do, I want to choose what I do and I want to choose who I do it with. And we were discussing these stories, and then we were like, there's something in this. We've not ended up here by accident, you know, like there must be something in this. And we kind of like had this idea to use our stories, use our experience, and try and create some genuine prevention and awareness. Thankfully, what we do today is very different to what we first thought then. But that's how it started. So yeah, we had all these discussions. I was dead early days. I was like doing stuff behind the scenes. Mark was going out, sort of meeting people. He's a bit of a success story of his treatment centre. So he gets wheeled out and meets loads of influential people, which is good. And yeah, I was there for 4 months. I came back. We were doing stuff a bit back and forth. And then I was like, there's somewhere for rent, like around the corner from me. Come back. We need to do this now. And so, yeah, and that was it really. Pretty much WHYSUPP was off from there. Yeah, that's kind of like, I pretty much got well and started WHYSUPP all at once. So, yeah.
I love that. And so WHYSUPP, the way I hear it is like just WHYSUPP, like just be a bit more aware. Is that how you were thinking about the name WHYSUPP?
To be honest, what actually happened with the name was a bit of a story. So what actually happened with the name was Mark said, we need a name. And he was like, we'll go away and think of some names, not tell each other, and then we'll come back with a list. And my list was shocking. I don't mind telling you, I am not the creative one in this partnership. Definitely not. And so Mark came up with WHYSUPP. It was the best on the list. And, and it did kind of fit, WHYSUPP, sort itself out, all that kind of stuff. But we used to spell it very differently. We used to spell it the way it was. And then within our first 12 months, we went to a branding individual and business guy called Tim Marner. Who's awesome.
Was it Tim Marner? I was about to say, was it Tim Marner? I know, I've heard of him before. I've not met him personally, but I know of him. Yeah.
So we went seeing Tim for a recommendation. And Tim was like, he looked on our website, he looked at our logo, and he was like, no, I'm going to swear now. He was like, that looks shit. And that guy looks like he's jumping off a cliff. And I was like, I was gutted. I was gutted, but I couldn't argue with him. Do you know what I mean? He was right. And then he was like, look, he said, leave it with me. He said, I'm going to make your brand so cool you can put it on a t-shirt. And hence.
What did he do? And he put it in a coffee mug I saw before.
Yeah. So we've got it everywhere. We have merchandise and everything. We do some cool stuff with funds from merchandise. I'll tell you about in a bit. But yeah, basically, the new WHYSUPP, the one that everyone knows today and we see all over, was created then really. And the business changed a lot as well. We thought we'll go and share our story with a bunch of school kids, that'll be meant. And we're dead interested. And it kind of was interesting. We did it for a little bit, but then we were like, it's not enough. The story's not enough. You've got to add value. You've got to educate. We had to kind of carve out where our service fits, who's it for, what are the outcomes going to be and stuff. And we took it really seriously, to be honest. As much as we might have a laugh and a joke and we have a bit of fun on social media, actually, I think to have a service that is for everybody, we don't want to just talk to people who are struggling, because then we've missed it, haven't we? Do you know what I mean? We've missed the chance. We want to talk to everybody. We think this information is for everyone, because, we say this a lot, like, we can't save everyone. We can't stop people ending up where they do. We might be able to help some people. We might be able to help some people spot things sooner. We might be able to educate them in that way. But one of the biggest impacts we can have is by, if there's a group of 10 friends, I might not be able to save the one, but I can give the other 9 the information to spot things, the things that my friends didn't have, and that sort of thing, whether that's in a business, in a sports club, in a school, and also, like, we always thought it would be addiction, but over the last few years, we're brought in under like mental health and well-being, which is quite apt for this week. And we knew there was something in that. And to be honest, it's funny really, our addiction kind of validates us. That's our story that kind of gives us the credibility. But often the thing that we're drawing on most is our recovery.
Yeah.
That ability to manage on a day-to-day basis, that ability to take care of myself and the things that I've put in place. Those are the things that we're adding or we're sharing probably more than anything else that can help everybody. We call it recovery. You know what I mean? We've learned what we've learned because of where we've been, but the things we've learned, anyone can benefit from them. So yeah, we do loads of different stuff today. We do loads, like it's a really cool business. We've done a lot of different things, but yeah, it's hard to kind of put into a. We always struggle with what do we do. We do lots. So yeah, it's good though.
I think that what you actually was on your website before, what you guys actually say on your website pretty much does encompass everything that you said. We help people understand addiction, but we also help the mental well-being aspect as well. Because if you think about addiction, for you, like you said, when we first started this conversation, it's like, I didn't have trauma, I didn't have mental health issues. It was just, you ended up having those issues because of the addiction, not the other way around by the sounds of it. But at the end of the day, it's still a mental health issue, and being able to understand the recovery side does take that resilience piece. It's understanding that self-awareness piece of yourself, understanding, I think what you said before as well, which I want to touch on, which is you have to feel the emotions, you have to go through it, you can't distract yourself, you have to overcome it. And I think a lot of people, whether they use alcohol, drugs, phones, technology, whatever it is, a lot of people are getting into difficult situations, especially this last 12 months, 16 months. They're starting to use different things as outlets to distract themselves from the stress that they're feeling. And having that as just having that conversation with a group of people in a business or even school and things like that, that's hugely beneficial.
Yeah, definitely. I think, that sort of approach of, look, stuff's going to happen. It's not about a mental illness. It's not about, addiction or anything else. Stuff's going to happen, and you're going to need to be in the best shape and have the best way possible to deal with it. And that's kind of like where we come from. And I think the fact that we have been through what we have as well, we kind of sort of said to them, we say it quite often on our socials, if we can do it, so can you, Look, Mark says that, he's gone from being kidnapped to doing yoga with a bunch of pensioners in a leisure centre. Don't tell me you can't do it. And crashing 4 cars in a week to meditating every morning. Well, and, me, Bolton boy, Northern accent, this, that and the other, if I can be open-minded enough to try some of this stuff. And I can also honestly tell people, I don't know how it all works. I'm not bothered. I just know that if I do these things, then I'm generally in a better state than when I didn't. So it's that kind of example, really, that I think is dead important. And as you just said, we were big on all that anyway, but in the last 16 months it is now, as you say, we talk about stressful events, traumatic events and all that kind of thing. Well, that's not the exception anymore, because we've all been through one. We've all just been through it. We've all experienced it. And, we've been through the same situation, but probably at very different experiences. There's a challenge in there for everyone. You don't know what someone's lived with for that 16 months. You don't know what their home life, relationship life, financial life, you don't know what that's been like for someone. And yet, more often than not, we still expect them to turn up and be the person they were 16 months ago. Have we done anything to make sure they can be that person? Have we kind of asked some more exploratory questions? Have we kind of asked them if they need any help? And so I think there's loads that we can do. And I think one of the nice things, the silver linings for us over the last 16 months and as a company is we've got a new service, which is something we're really proud of having achieved that in this last period of time. But also I think one of the biggest things for us is we're not having to convince people of the value in what we do anymore. I genuinely, before, especially with a business, a business, generally speaking, if they spend, they want return, and they weren't going to get a return on WHYSUPP. We're not there to give you a return. So the value was often sort of missed. We could tell them about retention and management time and disciplinaries and recruitment costs and unmanaged it. We could tell them all that, but the value, it was still, we were pushing it. Whereas now, I don't have to do that. I think anyone with half a brain now knows the value in what we do and the issues we talk about. And that actually is a nice position. Yeah,
I think that there's been a massive shift, especially in the last, I've been working in this space for a few years myself. So probably there's been a massive shift, especially in the last 5 years, of companies taking the mental health of their employees more seriously, not just so much as a bottom line, as a value thing, because there has to be compassion towards the humans that are working in our businesses. There is a responsibility there to make your workplace safe and psychologically safe, not just physically safe, but making sure that people can be the best versions of themselves. And also understanding, and I think this is a really big thing. So if you work in a pressured environment, understanding that someone might be getting pressure from home. And if they come to work and you put more pressure on that person, then you're not going to get the most out of that person. You're going to have, they are going to quit you. They're not going to be functioning at the best versions of themselves. So understanding warning signs, which I know is a big one for a lot of people, not just with addiction, but with understanding how people are coping with stress, anxiety, depression, other mental health issues, just understanding the different types of warning signs and behaviors that can come out of that, which I think is completely invaluable that you guys are giving. And I mean, I think that that's phenomenal what you're doing and sharing your story. I think is, to be fair, I think your story is really important, especially in the corporate world, because there are so many people in the corporate world that probably can relate to what you've gone through, but because they aren't the stereotypical, which is unfortunate and very non-PC addict, they're like, I'm completely fine. I'm doing all right. Like I'm functioning, right? We've all talked about functioning. I remember, I remember when I had anxiety, like, oh, you've got high functioning anxiety. And I was like, that's not actually still a good thing though, is it? Like it's still not a positive thing. Like just because I'm functioning doesn't mean I'm not suffering and there's a lot of people that talk about that.
Yeah. And I think that functioning becomes almost like a facade. It's just a facade.
It's a mask.
Yeah, and it's not sustainable. If you've got issues underneath and you're not addressing them and they're being pushed to one side. Look, for some people it'll be a month, for some people it'll be 2 years. I don't know what that time scale is, it varies, but at some point they're going to come. That time scale will run out. The clock's ticking. And it is really important. I think the nice thing is you just touched on them with businesses, like you said, I think we're coming up to 4 years now, so not as long as you, but we've got, we've been in it a little while, and I think we've seen that, companies for that 4 years, actually, the majority of forward-thinking companies had well-being agendas, policies, all that sort of stuff. I think the big difference for me is the fact that they're seeing now, or the switching now to the doing. So it's and it's not doing as a one-off, because we'd often get brought in on like a week like this, but then we wouldn't hear from them again. Yeah, and it'd be like things like that. Whereas now it's like, right, what can the team do? What can they do every week? What can we do every day? And that's a nice shift. It's not a one-hit wonder. And I think, in that corporate world, you mentioned the people who maybe don't fit the profile. I think that's one of the biggest things we can do. Is try and get that message that there ain't no profile, and it doesn't matter what you've got, it doesn't matter what you look like, it doesn't matter if you're blue collar, white collar, it doesn't matter whether your pay packet's this big, this big, whatever. If you're struggling, you're struggling. And there's always a route, and there's different routes and services and options for those different people, because they're not all going to engage in the same way. There's different things that they can do, but depending on their situation. But struggling is still struggling. Yeah, regardless.
No, I absolutely agree. And I think something that keeps popping up into my head is addiction and mental health issues. They don't discriminate. Like everyone's got mental health, whether it's good, bad, whatever it is, or in between, it doesn't discriminate. And addiction doesn't discriminate. And I think that we've got to change those mentalities towards it. So I think that's really, and people are struggling. People struggle for different reasons, and people cope with that struggling very differently as well. I know a lot of people that, especially in the corporate world, put on a mask, right? They just wear a mask and go, I'm going to go in, function at the best that they can do. But you're right, it's a ticking time bomb before that person's going to struggle in some form of way. It might not be addiction. It might not be necessarily outwardly mental health issues. But for instance, I talk a lot about the physical health issues that come from mental health issues. Like that's a huge part there too.
Yeah, definitely. It's not about, the way a struggle can manifest can be very different in one person to the other, can't it? I think the underlying theme is probably stress, more often than not. And, you mentioned right at the start, you were talking about that word being thrown around. And we've done sessions on this where I'm like, that word's been abused and misused for so long. We've lost the value of it. We've lost the importance of it. We're actually... Stress is a massive issue. Real proper, long-standing stress. Gosh, the impact on this and on your body and everything else, and that often is the common starting point for everything that comes after. Regardless if it's work stress, personal stress, a traumatic event, whatever. That if we all handled stress and managed stress a bit better, I would argue that we would minimize all those other issues that come after, regardless of which one it is, and it's one of the things that we do talk about quite a lot. And with this new kind of like service, if you like, that we're talking about a lot at the moment, which I've told you about, we're doing monthly type sessions where we're able to kind of reinforce and kind of, what would you say the right word is, repeat some of those messages, because some people need them repeating a lot before they pay attention to it, as you know. So
I know.
So I'm a big believer in that.
I'm a big believer in stress is the cause of a lot of issues. And I think that we minimize it because it's like, oh, well, everyone has stress. It's like, yeah, but if we learn how to cope with it better, like you and I spoke previously about it, you know, I'm actually shared a few different stories. When I was really stressed out, I ended up turning to an eating disorder. That was how I coped with whatever was going on in my world at that time. Kind of similar behaviors that can come out of that. Like we were talking about, there are similar behaviors with eating disorders and addicts, which is really fascinating to have that conversation. But they do manifest in different ways, and we do misuse the word stress. And we've got to stop going, it's all right, we're just stressed. Like we've got to change that mentality completely. So, you know, I think that that's an important message there as well. But thank you so much. You know, you've been on here for a bit over an hour, so I can't take up too much more of your time. But I wanted to quickly ask you, where can people find out about what you're doing? How can they see your stuff? Like, you know, tell us all your handles.
So social media, the more fun stuff is probably your Facebook and Instagram at WHYSUPP Official, which we really enjoy. And that probably is more aimed at the individuals who maybe want to have a positive page to follow. And also we talk a lot about the support that we offer for anyone who may be struggling. We have a help page. We also pay a trained professional to man a support line, so that if anyone is struggling, they can book a call. So they can do that through whysupp.co.uk/help, and all the booking, it's dead easy, so all confidential. But then more for the services and businesses, obviously get on the website, have a nosy. But obviously we're all over LinkedIn, WHYSUPP Limited, my own LinkedIn or anything else. If anyone wants to find out a bit more about what we do, and they can always drop me an email, liam@whysupp.co.uk. So more than happy to talk to anyone who needs it.
Awesome. I think what you guys are doing is super, super important. We were speaking that we do similar stuff, but just in a different way. And I think that is 100% needed right now with the state of the world. But just one final question to wrap it all up. What is one tip you would give to people to help them get their shit together, either literally or figuratively?
You could have warned me about this one.
I don't want anyone.
My specialist thing, the thing that I latch onto loads, is have a look at your morning and your evening routine. If you want to get your shit together, sort your morning out, sort your evening out, and you'll probably handle the bit in the middle a bit better. Yeah, there's loads of things beyond that, but that's probably the simple version.
I agree with that. So that's actually what I tell everyone is like, get your morning right, get your evening right, and your writer's reign. That's the first thing that you can do. So I love that tip. So thank you so much for spending an hour with me. I really appreciate you sharing your story. I know it was definitely an important story to hear. So I know that a lot of people would have appreciated hearing that. So thank you so much. I'm going to be putting up all your details up in the comment section as well, so people can find you easily there as well. But thank you so much. I think the work that you're doing is phenomenal, and I wish I had spoken to Mark as well, but maybe for another day, because you guys have got two different stories.
I was going to say, you can do a gambling one. You get two then, don't you?
Two for the price of one.
There you go.
All right, awesome. So thank you so much. Really appreciate it. And everyone, until next time, get your shit together, literally and figuratively.